Hi everyone. So I'm gonna give a brief introduction of Emily. Emily Rivas is a first generation college graduate priding herself on providing equitable educational spaces for all students. As a project manager of a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, she has been able to further the efforts of community members, families, and students. Her work focuses on a socially driven educational experience encompassing all members of a community. The greatest goal is to get our underprivileged youth into a position where they can win, excel, and have equity in education and community. Emily Rivas completed both her bachelor's and master's coursework in history at CSU Fresno. So, with that, we'll pass it over and give a round of applause to Emily.
Thank you. I want to start by saying, if you hear a dog, I'm so sorry. I'm trying my best to not make him, riled up, but, working from home is a little bit difficult. So just bear with me. Um, so again, hi everyone. My name is Emily, as I'm sure you already kind of heard a million times. My presentation today is going to hit on all three topics chosen by the STEP Scholars series, which is going to be agency, adaptability, and authenticity. Authenticity is my personal favorite, and we'll get into that and why it's my favorite. But before I begin, I do briefly want to explain my title to my presentation. It's Being a Triple Threat and Owning It. So I am a 90s baby, but I predominantly grew up in the 2000s. And I don't know how many of you can relate, but in the early 2000s, there were so many magazines that were obsessed with people being triple threats, right? Like dancers, singers, actors, actors turned directors, filmmakers, all this kind of like stuff. And so I wanted to make it to where we own the fact that we are triple threats, right? Right. We own the fact that we have the ability to be triple threats. We get to be our own front page story, even as minorities. And so to me, that's what's most important to convey is that even though we may never be in a magazine, we are the headline of our own lives. And so with authenticity, adaptability, and agency on your side, you can always be a triple threat. So let's go ahead and move forward. I do want to say before I begin that if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We are going to have a Q&A toward the very end. And so feel free to put those questions there. I'm not ignoring you. So a brief introduction about me. Here you could see my cute little face. I am the youngest of three girls. I come from a Mexican and Central American family. My mom is born here. My dad is del Salvador. I was raised very, very Central American. And with that being said, that meant not talking back. That meant falling in line. That meant, everything you can think of. Think Mexican culture on steroids. That was the way that I grew up. In terms of my education, I am a first generation college student. I am the first in my family to graduate, but I do like to tell everyone that I am not the last. My sisters both are currently in school. I know that they sacrificed a lot so that I was able to get an education. They were a lot of times the test subjects. And so I was the first success story, but I'm not the last. My sister actually is an alum of UC Merced, recently graduated in fall. So I want to give her a quick little shout out. I'm very proud of her and she didn't get the graduation that she deserves. And so I'm just highlighting her here. And also I wanted to briefly touch on my work. So like Melissa said, when she was introducing me, I am a manager for a nonprofit here in Fresno, California called United We Lead Foundation. We predominantly work with minority students, whether they be migrant education students, they be low income, first generation, all of that good stuff. So I definitely like to say I put my money where my mouth is. I like to work with communities that reflect who I am and where I come from. And so that is why I choose to do the work that I do. As you also did hear, I have my degrees in history, which I do use. I mean, I do employ them in the way that I approach students and the way that I write grants and the way that I kind of carry myself, my own authenticity. But my work a lot focuses on education and on empowering students within their education to know that they have options and their limits are boundless. So that's a little bit about me. And now, because I do come from education, I'm going to give you an overview. And so my overview is kind of like a little bit of an agenda or what I'm going to talk about. So as we discussed earlier, and I'm sure why you're here, it's because we're going to be talking about agency, adaptability, and authenticity. However, I'd like to gear your attention toward the bottom of my screen, which is a quote that I borrowed from the late, great Rough Rider himself, DMX. And it says, "I was a winner, I just didn't know it." So I can only speak for myself, but this quote resonates a lot with me. Growing up, I knew I had goals, I knew I had dreams, I knew I had places I wanted to get to, but I had no idea how to get there. Throughout this presentation, you will learn some of those moments firsthand, but throughout all of this, I want you to remember that we are all winners in our own right and to own that. And so you might not know yet, or you might just be coming into your own and realizing that you're a winner. But we all have the right to win. There's enough food at the table for everyone. And I know that each one of you is going to complete greatness in your life. So now let's move forward to agency. So let's get into it. The sociological definition of agency is really acting on your own behalf or on your own accord. So as a first generation student, I had never heard of the word, let alone the meaning, until my third year of college. I can remember clearly what professor said it and in what context. And admittedly, I was a student that was too smart for their own good. So I'd mentally check out a lot during class. I'd be like, I already did the reading. Like, I don't really need to listen. I'll kind of come back in when I want. And so when I came back into the conversation, um, they were talking about agents. And in my mind, I'm like, what kind of agents are you talking about? Are you talking about like State Farm agents? Are you talking about FBI agents? You got to remember, I was a history major. I was trying to like grasp at straws. And at this point, I was completely confused. So I wrote down the word on my hand. And I was like, okay, I'm going to look it up when I go home because I was embarrassed to ask a question because I was not paying attention. And so I get home and I Google the word and I realize what it means is that you can have individual power and you can make decisions on your own. And I'm not kidding you when I tell you I was like dumbfounded. This whole time there was a word for what I was seeking, and I had no idea how to seek it or how to even put it into one word, let alone context of what I was looking for. And then I jumped to, why did I never learn this word, right? Why have I never felt like I had agency? Why have I always felt like I'm on this path for others and not for myself? And that leads me to the last section of the slide, which is, as a first generation American, these systems aren't built for me. They're not built for me. They're not built for people like us. They aren't set up for me to choose, let alone to win, right? And so my parents, yes, let me make decisions, but with their approval. I like to tell them to this day that I call them all the time for permission for stuff, and they like to tell me that I'm a full grown adult and I don't have to ask them, but I am still conditioned to that, right? And so I cannot stress enough how much learning this word and practicing my own agency changed my future, a future that I didn't even know I had, right? So it's when I started using this agency that I started making decisions for myself and making decisions that I felt I could be proud of, right? And so some of these examples are um choosing to walk away from things that no longer served me, or choosing to get involved in things that I felt aligned with what it was I wanted to do. So once I learned this word, I completely did a shift in what I was doing. When I was in college, I had to work. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us do. And I was working in retail because it was easy. I knew it. It was consistent. I knew they were always going to need someone to fold clothes. And then when I learned this word, and I realized how much a lot of times our communities aren't told about agency, and we aren't told how much power we have within ourselves. I completely changed what it was I was doing. I started working in education around the age of 19 or 20, and I did it purposefully because of this word that I learned. Um, Again, I can't stress enough to you how much I did not know what this meant. And so I started working in education, and I was working tutoring students. I would work uh, just anything that I could get my hands on to be around people that were in my position when I was younger. And so I think learning agency gave me the ability to not only become my own agent of my own life, but it also gave me the ability to empower others to realize their own agency. And so to me, like I said a little bit earlier, being a first generation American and realizing that these systems were not built for us, um, I took it upon myself to make it work for me. And I think that that's something that we definitely can explore and we can talk about as we move forward in this presentation. Um, so I lost my spot. So becoming your own person. This is a part of agency that no one really tells you about, is the part where you become responsible for yourself, all parts of yourself. So that can be both daunting and exciting. Um, Sorry, give me 1 second. Uh, a little miscommunication at work. Sorry. All right. So, becoming your own person. So, listening to yourself is maybe the easiest one, and yet the action that most of us resist. Um, I can only speak for myself when I say that I second guess everything. I am a chronic second guesser. I literally second guess everything. I'm not even kidding. There was one time, and my mom loves to tell this story. As you will see throughout this presentation, I talk about my parents a lot. Um, but my mom, I was already living on my own for years, and I called my mom like at midnight to ask her if I should put a sticker on my suitcase. And my mom was like, "Why are you calling me at midnight to ask me if you should put a sticker on your suitcase?" And I was like, "Well, I can't decide. Like, is it going to make me look tacky or is it cool?" My mom was like, "I don't care what you do. Just put whatever you want on your suitcase." But it's that. It's literally like I had every right to make that decision, and yet I couldn't. And so I think a lot of it comes down to my upbringing. My parents were the decision makers. I had no say in the decisions that they made, even if they only pertain to me. And I don't blame my parents for that at all. That is how they grew up. That is what they know. And of course, it's an act of protection. But it's learning to not second guess yourself that is very hard, because as first generation students, a lot of times am I doing it right? Am I figuring it out? Am I even on the right track? What am I doing? Right. And so that is something that I can't encourage enough, is listening to yourself, understanding that you are your biggest advocate. The gut feeling that you have is there for a reason. And so follow it. Another thing is overseeing your own agency. And this one is my personal favorite. Um, I always ask myself, am I honoring my agency? Because now that I have agency and I know how to use it as a tool, I would hate if someone made me feel like I didn't have any options, or that I didn't have the ability to decide for myself. So, of course, this agency happens in moderation, because there are certain people we have to listen to, right? I have to listen to a boss. I work for somebody. But at the end of the day, there are certain spaces where I can decide what happens to me, where it shouldn't be, we must always oversee and remind us we must always remind ourselves of our own power. And so sometimes I think that overseeing your own agency is something that we a lot of times give to other people. We a lot of times give power to other people because it takes responsibility off of us. It makes the decision making process a little bit easier, or we kind of go along with things because they kind of just come in naturally. So we learn not to question. I'm like, oh, well, they told me to do this, so I'm really not going to question it. But am I comfortable with it? Is it something that I want to do? Is it something that um, supports my mission, my overall mission, right? And if I'm not comfortable with it, I have every right to say that I'm not. A lot of times I like to compare myself to my white counterparts. I used to be in student government at Fresno State, and they were very active in saying, no, I don't like that. No, I don't want to do that. That doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for my college. And so that became kind of my mindset, was completely mimicking them, and understanding that I could own that on my own and I didn't need anyone's permission. Now, us as people of color or coming from communities of color, a lot of times that translates a lot differently. Um, for me, it translated to people thinking I was mean, to people thinking I was a bunch of expletives, which I mean is fine. But that to me is something that, again, you have to own, and you have to own as part of your agency. If I'm practicing my agency and it makes you uncomfortable, it's because something internal in you and not anything that has to do with me. So I think understanding that and coming to terms with that and realizing that there are people that are always going to see you as the enemy because that's how they see you anyway, might as well, follow your own desires. And then lastly, this goes, let me see. Maybe the most forgotten is that power we have of being our own agents. And with power comes a lot of responsibility. We have the power to either own that agency or demand certain things from certain systems, or we have the ability to partake in those systems that already don't serve people like you and I. Now, again, I can only speak for myself when I say that I would rather disrupt every system that was built against me than partake in one where people like me were an afterthought. So I would rather go the hard route and figure it out than partake in a system that benefits me because of something that they thought about 50 years after establishing the system, right? There is power in agency, there's power in numbers, there's power in passion. And remember that as you truly start exploring your own paths, remember that there's power in that. There's power in numbers. There's power in people that think like you. There's power in think tanks and in having friends that think similar to you. And you don't have to settle for the status quo. You can challenge these systems. You can choose to refuse to partake in them, and you can become your own person all in the same right. So let's go ahead and move forward. So adaptability, again, I just want to let you guys know, not again, because I didn't say it before, but I am a talker. So if at any point, you're like, Emily, slow down, someone please feel free to tell me. I don't mind. I do love to talk. So adaptability, we're already used to adapting, right? As a first generation college student, I had to adapt to changes in college. I had to adapt to changes before college. These systems, again, like I said earlier, are not set up for us. And that is exactly why adaptability is a superpower. I think us as first generation college students or low income students, whatever you may be, we have the ability to morph. And we have this, along with adaptability comes resiliency. And so we are built on a history that is resilient. We are built on a familial background that is adaptable. If we're first generation Americans, clearly we're adaptable. Our parents came to a country that they had no idea about, and we just sitting in this Zoom call are a success story, right? So I do want to take you back to my high school experience of applying to college, because this was a horrible experience. And I want to take you back to it just because it did show my own adaptability. And to me, it showed me my own strength. So my experience applying to college was horrible. And when I say that I had no idea what I was doing, I wholeheartedly mean it. I had no idea. I thought I did. I thought I was smart. And then I got to the applying process and I was like, girl, SIP, I have no idea. I remember walking into the computer lab, and I can clearly remember the number of the computer lab room and all of this stuff. Um, and I was filling out my college application, and I was sitting next to this guy that I had been friends with my whole life, and he's filling it out. And he wasn't first generation. He had a mom that was a teacher. So he was like, just doing it like second nature. And then I was filling it out. And I'm not even lying. I was copying and pasting what he was putting. I was putting the same schools. I was putting the same kind of information. Everything he was doing, I was doing. The college application system was a little bit different than it is now, but still same gist. So I was like, oh, he's applying to UC Riverside. I'm going to apply to UC Riverside. He's going to go to Fresno State. I'm going to go to Fresno State. I was just following whatever this dude was doing because I could see it with my own two eyes. And I knew that at least I'll have a buddy there. Right. And then my high school counselor, I will never forget this lady's name. I will never forget her face. I will never forget this lady. She comes up to me and she tells me, oh, I'm shocked you're applying. If I were you, I wouldn't apply. You're not going to get in anywhere. And that to me was so like, there's no way to express it other than she took the air out of my sails. I remember going home and I snitched on her to my mom too. I told her, I was like, hey, you will not believe what this lady told me. And I am very lucky that I had a mom that, again, is very much an agent in her own right. And she went to the school and she told her something and she defended me. She was definitely my advocate. But if it weren't for this moment, it wouldn't have challenged me to be adaptable, right? I would have been okay coasting with wherever I ended up. I would have been okay ending up wherever the guy sitting next to me was going, because I felt like I didn't have an option. I felt like I didn't have the ability to apply where I wanted to, or even explore what I wanted to, because I was lucky to be even applying. And then this counselor had the audacity to tell me that I shouldn't apply, being that I was a high performing student and a very active student. And she still told me that. And so to me, it was like, there is nothing that sets me apart to where I can't apply. And then it completely changed this mentality in me where it was like, I know I want to do X, Y, and Z, but I don't know how to get there. Then I became someone that was so adaptable to the point where I started doing my own research on what is it that I want to do? Why is it that I want to go here? And her lack of faith in me only grew my self-esteem. And it was, if I would not have taken this as a moment of change, it would have broken me. It would break anybody, because I was a 17-year-old kid who had no idea what I was doing. And unless I had the ability to adapt and the ability to see within myself my own power, she would have ruin my future without me even having one, right? And so this is just to say, like, the naysayers, the people that doubt you, whether it be people close to you or people far from you or people that are supposed to be in positions to help you, at the end of the day, you are more adaptable than you even realize. You are more powerful than you even realize. And understanding that and owning that and realizing that, again, like I said, as first generation or low income students, we are already adaptable. We've already learned how to do that. So use it in your own education, use it in your own story, because if that college counselor or that high school counselor had not told me that, I would have never even used my adaptability as a tool. I would have never realized that I could make the decision for myself to be able to go after what I wanted and to go after everything that I wanted. I had these self-limiting beliefs of I'm even lucky to be applying to college. And then after she told me that, and after I cried to my mom, I'm not gonna lie, I cried very hard. I realized that these self-limiting beliefs were not only put on me by myself, but also put on me by other people. She was limiting me. Her belief in me was limiting me. So if someone is already limiting me and their beliefs are limiting me, who am I to do the same to myself, right? I'm only making myself suffer more. And so that's definitely something that I learned in my time in high school and with that experience. And so I share that experience to tell you that there's always moments of growth in adaptability, and growth is hard, but it's definitely a defining moment. And I'm years and years out of high school, and I can still remember it clearly because it's something that definitely defined my ability to be adaptable. Um, so moving forward, some key points about adaptability, and I think I can speak for all of us when I say that change, whether sought or thrust upon you, is scary. I've had key points of adaptability that tested my ability to put myself before my comfortability, right? So a lot of times being adaptable makes you uncomfortable. Change makes us uncomfortable. I can only speak for myself when I say I hate change. I don't like to do anything different. I'm very much a routine kind of gal. I lived in the same apartment for 6 years because I didn't want to have to move. And so that's how much of a routine and how much of a um, person I am, that I seek comfortability, right? But I'm going to highlight three certain times in my life where my adaptability was utilized in a way that it changed my trajectory, and it definitely changed my outcome of the future that I didn't even know I was going to have. So my first one is definitely moving away for college. I don't know how many in this room are transplants to their city, but I was. I had, again, oh, I spelled that wrong, but I had no idea what I was doing. Um, I did not know, and I love to share this story with people, especially my students. Now that I work in education, I work predominantly with high school students. I had no idea that you had to register for classes. I mean, no, you had to register for dorms before you even moved, right? I didn't know that. Like I had no idea. And so again, I was a self-limiting believer. And when I went to my dog days, um, they told me that I should have already filled out my information for dorms. And I was like, what do you mean? I should have who was gonna tell me that? I had no idea. And so then they tell me like, oh, well, we don't have dorms left. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have dorms left? Your girl has nowhere to live. I need to live somewhere. And they kind of told me that I was, out of luck and to figure it out. And so at the age of 17, I'm a September baby. So I graduated at 17. I moved at 17. I had to figure it out. I got an apartment. I right across the street because I didn't drive, which is even worse. And so I lived right across the school. I lived right across from Fresno State. Um, and I made it work. And I have to give, credit where credit is due. My parents definitely helped me, both emotionally and financially. I'm not going to lie, because I had no idea what I was doing, and I had to adapt. I had to figure it out. And I love to share the story about my parents. When I first moved, I was severely attached to my mother. I still am, like I said earlier. But my parents bought me like all this brand new stuff, right? I'm so thankful. But they bought me like a miniature broom and like a miniature mop and like mini pots and pans. And I love to tell my mom that it's because she thought I was going to come back home. My mom's like, no, I always knew you were going to stay, whatever, whatever. But I like to think that she thought I was going to come back home, because I think in that moment we were all doubting my adaptability. I was the first one to move out. I was the first one to move away, especially for school. I had no idea what I was doing. And so that was a moment where adaptability had to happen. I had no other option than to roll with the punches. Um, I knew I did not want to go back home. I knew that I had my out in that moment and I was not going to let it slip through my fingers. I come from a very small town where a lot of people kind of just stay. And I did not want that to be my story. And so I had to adapt. I had to figure it out. Yes, I had a mom that had taught me already how to cook and clean, but it's a lot different when you're doing it on your own. And so that was something that was an adaptable moment for me. Another one is getting into a PhD tracked program. So when I was at Fresno State, I thought I was an average student. I did not think it was anything to write home about. I was just like, living in the motions. I was of the idea that I was going to get my degree in history and then get a credential and then become a teacher and have 2.5 kids, and that was going to be my life. But that is not how it worked out. In 2017, which was actually my last year of college, I graduated in 2018. I was placed into a McNair program. And for those of you that don't know what McNair is, it's a federally funded program where they choose you to be a PhD track student. So it can happen in your undergrad mainly. And then they help you throughout your master's and your PhD. They kind of follow you throughout that journey, give you tips, give you help you succeed, all of that kind of stuff. And then to boot, I didn't even apply for this, right? I had a class with a professor that everyone said was so hard, and she was. They were not lying. But then one day she comes up to me and she's talking to me and she's like, "Hey, Emily, I need to talk to you after class." And I was like, "Oh my God, did I turn in something wrong? Is she gonna roast me? What did I do?" And so again, I'm going through all these motions of like, what is going on? And I go up to her after class and she's like, "Hey, I wanted to tell you something. I think you should really apply for this program." And the whole time that she's talking to me, I'm thinking, she must have thought I was the other Emily because there was two Emilys in my class. And I was like, there is no way she's talking to me, not Emily Rivas. She's probably talking to the other Emily, and it confused us. And then even when she was done with her whole spiel, I was like, "Are you sure you're talking to me? Like, I'm Emily Rivas. I'm not the other Emily." And she's like, "No, I know who I'm talking to. I'm not dumb." But it was so crazy to me that she was choosing me. This professor that was so hard in my department was choosing me to be a PhD track student when thought I was an average student. I thought I was below average. But for her to see something in me that I did not see in myself, again, was a moment of adaptability for me, because then I got swung into this program that I had no idea about even a week before. And then I go into it and everyone's talking about PhDs and applying to Arizona State and getting funding and getting grants and having someone come in and do a presentation with you and getting published. And I was like, what is going, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, what? And so again, it was a key moment of adaptability. I made a buddy in McNair. His name is Steven. I will never forget him. He is my right hand man always. He took me under his wing and was like, "Hey," when I came in, he was also a Latino. He's like, "When I came in, I had no idea what they're talking about. This, and this is what we do. These, and these are the dates. Talk to your mentor, have her kind of commit, and then go from there." And so I had to be adaptable. I had to figure it out. It was a blessing in disguise, because I remember when she first signed me up, I was very resistant. I was like, "I don't want to do a PhD. That seems like a lot of work." But after I got into it, it was definitely a blessing in disguise. It was something that definitely set me apart. And it made me adaptable, but it put me in a different setting that I would have never been in had it not been that professor. And I just want to say that this shows the difference in relationship building and the difference in the way that people can treat you. Because that high school counselor was someone that looked just like me, and this professor that set me apart was someone that looked just like me. And so they both had the power to either be on my side or be against me. And one chose to be against me and put self-limiting beliefs on me, while the other one chose to put me on a pedestal and help me kind of reach the goals that I wanted to reach. So that's definitely something, as well as I think that a lot of times we forget that within our own communities, there's a lot of competition. And like I said in the beginning, there really shouldn't be. There's enough food at the table for all of us to eat. And that's definitely something that this professor taught me, and she definitely enacted in my own life. So another key moment of adaptability for me was actually buying a house at a very young age. And I was changing careers at the same time. And at the same time, COVID happened. And if you can guess how I felt like I did not know what I was doing. And so I was closing on my house the same week that COVID hit. I had gotten my job in February, and then we had a meeting at the end of March about either we figure it out or the company's going to close. And then at the same time, um, I was just, everything was shutting down because of COVID. So I bought my house. I went through a lot of challenges with that in and of itself. Buying a house is not easy. And then at the same time, I was changing careers. So when COVID happened, I was in the midst of a career change. Like I said, I had already made up my mind that I wanted to be in history, and then I just kind of fell into my job. For those of you that don't know, like I said a little bit earlier, I believe I work for a nonprofit, but my education is in history. So it's completely different realms. And even though I do use a lot of my history degree in what it is that I do, it was completely a shift for me, right? I had been doing my master's. I was already used to kind of like that caliber of work. And then to shift into being working for a nonprofit, writing grants, managing things that I had never experienced was so hard for me. And like I told some of the step workers earlier, I think that what really helped me was my ability to be authentic to myself and my ability to be honest at the fact that I did not know what I was doing, and I was willing to share that with the people around me. I was willing to tell my boss, "Hey, I don't really know what I'm doing right now, but if you show me, I'm more than willing to figure it out." Same with my house. Every I'm not kidding when I tell you everything in my house broke, but I was willing to kind of ask for the help and be adaptable. I kept a close relationship with my realtor. I talked to her all the time, and it was because I needed the help. And so I think with adaptability also comes the ability to ask for help and the ability to say, I'm trying to get to point B. I'm trying to be adaptable, but I need the help to get there. And so for me, that's what this third action actually taught me was um, realizing that I can ask for help in this transition. So there can be a lot of change, and change can be scary, but I don't have to go through it alone. There are a lot of people that have already been through what I've been through and can help me get to where I want to be. Um, so let's go ahead and move forward. So then I'm going to touch on the last topic, which is authenticity. And I like to tell everyone that authenticity brings up value, right? So if something's authentic, usually it's worth more. And that's why I pride myself on being authentic. It's owning your own story. It's understanding that you don't always have to be politically correct in professional settings. Of course, in moderation, you can't always be like saying whatever you want. But there is a book, and I can't remember the name, but it's all about like disrupting spaces as people of color in professional areas, right? And a lot of times we're taught to be very robotic in our motions and kind of follow suit of other people. And like I said, I would rather go the hard way and make the system work for me than partake in a system that wasn't built for me, right? And that goes as well along the lines of professionalism. Professionalism was created to keep us in our space and created to keep us in certain boundaries. And I am someone that admittedly likes to test those boundaries. And the reason for that is just because who says that that is incorrect, right? Who says that I can't do that? And a lot of times I get people asking, how do I remain true to myself, or how do I come off as confidently as I do? And my only answer is that I believe in everything I'm doing. I do not partake in anything that I don't feel aligns with what it is that I want to do. I've had the option, or I've put myself in positions where at this point I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. But when I was younger and when I was figuring it out, I held myself to that same standard. I am not going to diminish my value to do something that I don't think aligns with what I want. And I'm going to share this story. Hold on. Oh, let me change slides because it's on the next slide. Um, so being authentically you. For a long time, I was ashamed to be my authentic self. I thought my peers would judge me, my family, my friends. It wasn't until what I call the crash down that I had no other option than to be my authentic self. And what I mean by the crash down is, and this is going to get a little personal. So again, feel free to share in the chat if there's anything that, resonates with you. But in I would say 2017, 2018, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And it was something that definitely took me back as a first generation Latina and with a dad from Central America. Depression is not, what is that? What are you talking about? You're just going through it and you need to get over it, right? And so when I got diagnosed with depression, it was definitely something that was hard for me. It was something that to me, I was ashamed for a very long time. I didn't know how to kind of cope with it. I knew that like I was on medicine and all that kind of stuff. And like I was feeling better, but it was like, how do I tell anybody? How do I come up with that conversation? How do I reach across those lines to let people know? And it wasn't until my mind actually forced me to be authentic that I didn't even realize how powerful that is, right? I could no longer put on a show that everything was perfect, that my life was perfect, that I had everything figured out. I am the first one to admit that I am still figuring it out. Like I said a couple slides before, I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't. But it was this crash down that made me really see that it's okay to not know what I'm doing, and it's okay to be authentic in that, and it's okay to be switching careers and figuring it out and be authentic to that and let people know. I might have 1-2 years experience in what I'm doing, but I'm authentic to it, right? I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to become the best version of myself for the people that I'm serving. And so I think that being authentic to you, and like I said in the last slide, understanding what you feel aligns with your morals and your beliefs, and utilizing that and being okay to utilize that, right? So for me, my thing that always stuck with me about my dad was my dad telling me, hay que ser servicial, right? You're supposed to be of service to any and everyone that needs your help. And that's something that's always stayed with me. And that's a belief that I will always live with. It's something that is authentic to me. I am 100% a person of service. I like to be out in the field that I'm working in. I like to make a difference. I like to be with high school students and laugh with them and laugh at their jokes and understand that I was there before and I thought I was funny too and all of this kind of stuff. And it's that authenticity that everyone can see. Not only is it professionals that can see it, not only is it my family that can see it, but it's also the people I'm working with. Because in my field, I work in education and I work with a lot of low income first generation students and families. And they're not going to trust me if I'm coming off anything other than authentic, right? I don't want them to think that I am anything that I'm not. I don't want to sell them the moon when I can only promise them a rock in my front yard, right? And so I think being authentic about that and letting them know that I have been in a similar situation. My parents have been in a similar situation. And here I am, a success or a semi success. I'm being authentic to myself, to my story, to my parents' story, and to what I can offer people that I work with. So I think being authentic is something that, like I said, it brings up value. A lot of times we kind of change and morph ourselves into what certain careers or certain professional spaces are expecting us to be. Um, and I am the first to tell you that everyone's kind of just falling in line. A lot of times people in professional spaces as well don't really know what they're doing. And so if you're authentic to yourself, that's the biggest thing that's going to carry you. For myself, I have to say that when I first got my job with where I'm at now, I was a head of community outreach because, again, I like to talk. But when COVID hit and all of this stuff happened, I got promoted to project manager. And I was telling the girls before anyone came in that I think that that's definitely something that's helped me with my work is being authentic and being honest in the fact of I might not know it, but I'm willing to learn it. And if I'm going to impact even one person's life, it's worth it to me. And so I think that that's something that's definitely resonated with the people, not only that I work for, but that I work with. And it's taken me a very far amount, and I cannot wait to see how much further that authenticity takes me. And for you all, I believe that the world is changing and that authenticity is becoming more of something that is sought. So I would say don't change for the systems around you, make the systems around you change for you. And so I am kind of at my conclusion. We are going to do a Q&A, but my only conclusion is that if I could, so can you. Even though I may not personally know all of you, I can guarantee you that I'm one of your biggest cheerleaders. I am someone that wholeheartedly believes in each one of you in this room. Even if you're already a professional, I believe in everything that you're doing. And as the great Dave Chappelle once said, politics for local and community is everything. So remember to pay attention to your local politics. Remember to pay attention to the happenings in your local community. And remember that community building and trusting within people that look just like you and understanding, like I said multiple times, that there's enough food at the table for everyone will get you very far. So thank you all for being here with me. I am going to do some Q&A. So if you have any questions, please let me know. And I truly, truly appreciate you all for joining me. If for some reason you need to leave a little bit early, here's all my contact information. And please feel free to reach out. Are there any questions for me? Let me go ahead and if there's questions in the chat, if someone can ask me them because I can't see the chat.
Yeah, we can do that. Well, thank you, Emily, for that amazing talk. Like, oh, I got kind of teared up in the end a little bit. 'Cause, just I feel it when you're real about saying you're someone's cheerleader and being true to yourself and changing these systems, not changing for the system. That really resonated with me. Carmela asked a question. Carmela asked, "Do you ever wish you would have majored in something else?"
Oh my gosh, Carmela, that's such a good question. So I actually did major in something else. And I'm going to share a fun fact with you that's not really fun. But the average college student changes their major with around 4 to 5 times. And so I changed my major once. But again, this goes back to the story that I told you guys earlier. I chose a major because the guy sitting next to me chose that major. And the same high school counselor told me that if I didn't choose a major, of course, no one was going to take me. So I chose business. I had no business being in a business class. I went to my first business class my second year, my second semester at Fresno State. It was a statistics class. And I remember walking in, and have you guys ever seen that meme of that cat that's like, "Ah?" That's how I felt. I had no idea what was going on. It was definitely not for me. People were talking about statistics and numbers and recording data, and it was not for me. And so I did some introspection. I felt really bad because I thought it was going to make me graduate later. And that's another thing that I want to talk about. But I went home, I talked to my parents, and my dad and I have always had a little bit of a complicated relationship. He's my best friend and yet my enemy. And so we always bonded over history. My dad fled a civil war. And so to me, that was something that was um, eye-opening, and also something that always tied me to the history of my country, or my dad's country. And so it was we always bonded over history. I knew how important it was to him. Ever since my dad has come to this country, he writes in a journal every single day. And so to me, that is something that really resonated with me. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go for history. My dad always talks to me about history. My dad will talk to me about the pharaohs in Egypt, and my dad has no education, and he's maybe the smartest person I've ever met. And so I was like, my dad is smart and with it and knows all this history. Might as well go learn it and have these conversations and continue that history within my family. And so that's what I did. Do I ever wish I majored in anything else though? I don't think so. I would still do it all over again. And the reason for that is because I feel like I can empower people because I know our history. And a lot of times history is hard to learn, or it's not for everyone. And being that I know it, and that I see it, and I've learned it, and I've lived it, I can be, again, that agent of change, and I can help people kind of realize, like I said, that these systems were not built for us. I can give you exact dates. I can give you exact moments. And I would not change that at all. But that's a really good question. So thank you for that.
We have another question from Melissa. How was your transition from school life to now being a professional? Was the job searching process difficult for you?
Okay, that's a good question. Thank you, Melissa. So my transition from school life to work life was a little bit different because um, my school life abruptly changed when COVID happened. I remember I was at work. I worked at the Fresno State Learning Center, which was kind of like our tutoring center. And I remember it was like, when people are like, I remember when this happened, like the world stopped. That's how I remember COVID happening. I remember I was in the Learning Center, which is the basement of Fresno State's library. And it was just like everything got quiet. And then everyone was like, everyone's phones went off. And everyone was like, so does that mean we leave right now? Because they shut down the campus. And so my school life kind of changed a little bit with that. My school career ended a lot earlier than I thought, because I was no longer on campus. I did graduate that May. So it was only maybe like 2 months early, but it still didn't feel like a final goodbye. It still kind of doesn't. And so my professional life was something I dived into because it was the natural progression, I think. I had gotten my job in February, so right before COVID hit. So I was already kind of learning it. And then with COVID happening, I sort of just dived fully into it because that was the only thing that was going on. And that was something that was keeping me sane. Was job searching difficult for me? Oh my gosh, Melissa, I have to tell you, I am maybe one of the most annoying human beings when it comes to using my network. And I cannot stress that enough. Use your network. Again, I was working at Fresno State's Learning Center, and I was in student government at Fresno State. And anyone that would listen to me, I was telling them, you need to help me find a job. I am not going to graduate with my master's in history and not have a job by the time I walk out of this campus. And it was, again, I was being authentic to myself. I was being real. I need your help. I need to get a job. And so, especially in the learning center, every single day I would walk in and I would tell my boss, I need you to help me find a job. I know you know people in the right places. You need to help me. And every day he'd be like, okay, I'm looking. Like, what is it that you want to do? I was like, dude, anything, whatever you can give me, I'll take it. And then one day, our actual admin secretary, she comes up to me and she's like, hey, I have a friend that's hiring for a nonprofit and it seems really like up your alley. Maybe you should apply. And I was like, okay, I'll apply. And so I applied. And by the end of the week, I had the job. So That is how I kind of did my job search. I did my job search through other people. Of course, I was searching for my own jobs, but they were more in the know of who was hiring. As a young professional and someone that's trying to break through, we often go to like LinkedIn or Glassdoor or Indeed or wherever you can find work. When in actuality, a lot of times the work that you get is through the network that you've created. And I got that job based solely, of course, I had the experience, but I got that job based solely on the fact that our admin secretary knew who worked there. Right. And I was referred over and she told her I'm a good worker. I'm willing to put in the time and the effort. And that's how I got that job. And now here I am as a project manager in a nonprofit in a space that I never knew I was going to be in, simply because of the network that I created for myself. So that was a really good question. Thank you for asking that, Melissa.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Like literally job searching is a lot of who you know. So that's why it's important to be involved while you're in college and university, because you want to build those connections and network and do things like this. Like you all are connecting to Emily now. And Emily, aren't you hiring right now?
I am hiring. I am hiring. So we're hiring for summer. We're hiring tutors, project managers, credential teachers. So if you know anyone, you can go on my LinkedIn and I have it posted there. But we are hiring. So please feel free to check that out if you're looking for summer work.
Yes, get involved, y'all.
Yes. Well,
Stephanie has a question. What advice would you give to a junior in college on how to spend their last summer before graduating?
ooh,
That's a good one.
Stephanie, you hit me with the hard questions. Um, what advice would I give you? Well, I don't know what your circumstances are. So let me start with that. But I think if there's anything that I would have told myself, it would be to take healthy risks. So I would say during summer, explore those healthy risks. Is it quitting your job and doing what it is you want to do one last hurrah? Then do it. Is it building your network? Is it continuing to grow as a student? Is it giving yourself a well needed break? Whatever that may be, I think you already know what's going to work for you. But I think my junior year of college, the summer going into my senior year, is the only summer that I kind of gave myself to explore what I wanted to do. So I was still working, but I gave myself the option to explore different things. So I started looking up different programs, different work with my degree, um, different areas I might want to move. And so that's how I spent my last summer. I had a lot of fun in my last summer. And I think that that's definitely something that you should also consider is that after college, life really hits the fan. And so if this is your last hurrah, by all means, ride that wave, girl.
Yes, I agree. Work hard, play hard. You're only in college once. I
Exactly.
tell the students that all the time.
Yes, I completely agree.
Carmela has another really good question for you,
Mhm.
Emily. Would you like to continue work at nonprofits? Would you want to create a nonprofit in the future?
That's a really good question. So I would want to continue in nonprofits. I There's so much hard work in nonprofits. You spend a lot of time working for free, which is not anyone's fault. It's not even the nonprofit's fault. It's just you. Clearly, everyone that is working in nonprofits, especially small nonprofits, believe in what they're doing, because it's very time consuming. It's taxing on your mental. It's taxing on everything, right? You're spending a lot of time at a computer. You're spending a lot of time on the phone. You're spending a lot of time doing outreach, trying to reach families that don't even know that you exist. And so I would 100% stay in nonprofit work. It's been difficult. Nothing's a walk in the park, but I love what I do. I think the hardest part for me in nonprofit work is being someone's boss. I don't like to feel like I'm being mean to people. I struggle with that a lot. But I love it. I think that the work that I do, especially working in education and educational equity in low income communities, is so important to me. Letting people know that even though there is no, how would I say it? There's little to no resources in their area. I am one of those resources and I will drive to them. I will go to them. I will call them. I will call you every day until I'm blue in the face if that's what it takes. Because I 100% believe in the mission that this nonprofit has. Would I create a nonprofit in the future? It's funny that you asked that. I've had this conversation with a former boss of mine a million times. And I might one day down the line. I think I have a lot of experience in writing grants and in helping the management of nonprofit, but I'm not sure if I'd want to create one. I think it's something that there's a lot of good ones already out there, and they just need more people to kind of support them. But maybe one day I will. I'm not really sure. It'd be really cool. I'm sure it'd be a success, but I'm not sure how I would even go about it. But that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that, Carmela.
Yes. And Yendi kind of has like a follow up to that. And this might be our last question. So if you have one, if anyone has a pressing question, you know, well, we have a little time, but if you want to ask, I think we have time for one more. But Yendi asked a good one, and and it is, can you please explain a little bit more what a nonprofit is?
Sure. So a nonprofit is or the nonprofit I work for is a 501(c)(3), so we're tax exempt. That means that all the donations we get and all the money that we acquire, we can utilize on our community or in the spaces that we see fit. And so a nonprofit is, we do a lot of the groundwork where a lot of people kind of, there's a lull in services. And so, for example, here at UC Merced, there's a lot of services for students. But that's a little bit different in the high school system because high schools are not offered the same amount of resources across the board. It kind of depends on where you're at, especially location, visibility, activity in terms of going to college, things like that. So, a nonprofit is really a service to a community. Well, it kind of just depends because it can be a nonprofit. You can have a nonprofit for literally anything. I work in an educational nonprofit, but you can have a nonprofit for people with disabilities. You can have a nonprofit for refugees. You can have a nonprofit for legal services, all of this kind of stuff. And so it just really means that all the money that we acquire, we are expected to return that to our community, whether that be through services, whether that be through advocacy work, whether that be through grants, scholarships, financial support, things like that. But another thing that nonprofits really specialize in is in doing in-kind work, which is where that free work comes in. So a lot of times they will offer like food drives, or they will offer COVID vaccines or COVID vaccine registration or free cell phones. A lot of time that's in-kind work. Where we don't necessarily get paid for that work, but that's work that we utilize as outreach as well as to boost our efforts in reaching out to our community. That's a really good question, though.
Cool. I think I have one last question for you, Emily. And
Mhm.
so, with all of our students that are here, student staff and participants of our program, um, you know, to kind of wrap it all up and everything, everyone's at various levels in their educational journey and everything. Everyone has different plans and goals for what industries they want to enter. But I guess what kind of parting words do you have for our students who are still on the journey, still figuring out that career path? Like, what kind of just like advice do you have for them to get to that point where they cross the stage and get their diploma?
Right. I think my biggest advice is that you're already doing it. Right. A lot of times we start doubting ourselves when we get close to a finish line, or we doubt ourselves about literally everything. And I think that you're already in a space that you were never meant to be in, you know? And being that you're already in this space, just continue doing it. A lot of times things get in our way. And I remember my dad always telling me, like, if anything ever happens in our family, you need to continue your education. And that was the support that I needed that I didn't even know I needed. Because it was, if anything happens, education is still there. I need to maintain my education. I need to continue it. And that was what my family wanted for me. And so in my time in college, I lost a grandparent. I had a sister that got really sick. But my education was always something that my parents put at the forefront of my mind. And no matter what happened, education came first. And I knew that I had that support wholeheartedly. And I give that support back to you guys. That in this time, you have so much to figure out. You have so much to learn and so much to kind of just start living. And I think that understanding that you're already doing it and you're already in the space, you're already more than equipped to get to the finish line. And if I can say something very quickly, it would be um, that if you ever need help, if you ever need, anyone to look over something for you, if you need to chat, if you need literally anything, I can speak for both myself and Alex when I say that we're always on your side. There is no problem too big that you can't tackle with your community. And we are part of that community. And so I love to tell people, use me, literally use me. I am a self-proclaimed good resource to have. And I want you guys to know that I am a resource at your disposal whenever you need me. And I would just say no one has it figured out, and you're figuring it out slowly but surely. But it's the fact that you're trying